If you're not familiar with Eric's background, he is one of the foremost experts on malware, specifically ransomware issues, but has a really fascinating backstory. Back about 18 years ago, Eric was with the FBI, where he was an undercover field operative who was responsible for or directly involved in the capture of one of the most notorious spies in U.S. history, Robert Hanssen, who was in fact himself an FBI veteran. He's had a fascinating career since then. And now the principal of the Georgetown Group, which is a consultancy focused on security issues in Washington, D.C. I'm going to let Eric take it away from here. I encourage you to participate in the Twitter Q&A that we're going to do at noon Eastern Time. Please participate with the hashtag #AcronusWebinar, and we hope to see you there. We're actually encouraging participation by awarding an Apple Watch to the best question from the audience. So please join us there. Eric's got some really fascinating insights on what's clearly among the most serious security issues facing businesses and government institutions today. So please take it away, Eric.
Great, thank you, James. Well, hello everybody, and I see that as I'm speaking, more participants are joining. We just hit that 11 o'clock hour, and I want to follow up on one thing that James said that's pretty important, that ransomware is a pretty critical issue that we're dealing with on an ongoing basis, and it doesn't seem to have any stop to it. It's not only one of the worst cyber attacks out there, it's one of the worst crimes. And as far as a cyber crime, it has caused an immense amount of damage, and I'm going to get into that. Just wanted to show you this slide really quick. This is a little bit about me. If you do know about me, if you have seen me speak, you know that I like to start my keynotes, including my webinars, with a spy story. And you might ask yourself, well, what do spies have with ransomware? I know I got one question earlier over Twitter that said, hey, look, if I don't click on links or phishing attacks, won't I be safe? You know, isn't it just some sort of criminal trying to come after me? And the simple answer is no. Ransomware as a vector for attack isn't just used by criminals. In fact, there's an entire industry behind it, and it is also used by spies. It can be used as what's called a false flag. You can get hit by a ransomware attack, and then what you think you've just been hit by ransomware, which you solve, but what they've really been after is your data and your information to quietly steal it. So let's start with a spy story. And I'm calling this one The Worst Possible Place, something that Robert Hanssen, this guy, told me on the first day of my investigation into him. So a little background. I was working undercover for the FBI in counterterror and counterintelligence, mostly on the streets, doing surveillance work and investigation into spies and terrorists, everywhere from Baltimore down to Richmond, mostly in the DC area. When I was asked, or I was tasked, to go work undercover with an individual we suspected of being a spy for the FBI. So in fact, Robert Hanssen was one of the senior FBI agents who had worked against the Russians his entire career. And it turns out for most of that career, he had spied for the Russians, the Soviets before the Russians, and had stolen some of the worst secrets we've given. So here he is. We did catch him. That's his mugshot. You can see that right there. And on that first day of the investigation, when I was trying to get him to open up to me, when I was trying to figure out how I would conduct this to see if this was the spy that we were after, he told me something that I've never forgotten. He said, look, Eric, the spy is in the worst possible place. And I looked at him and, you know, I tried to keep my jaw from dropping, because here was a spy that I was supposed to investigate, who we thought was a spy. We were pretty sure was the guy we'd been after for careers in the FBI. And on that first day, he's telling me that the spy is in the worst possible place. To give you an idea of what we were doing in the FBI is we were working in the information assurance section, which if you fast forward a couple decades to today, information assurance in 2001 means cybersecurity today. They put Robert Hanssen, one of the worst spies, but also a hacker, in charge of cybersecurity for the FBI, and hoped that maybe we could catch him in the act of espionage and get him to plead guilty. So he tells me, the spy is in the worst possible place. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean by that? Trying to look nonchalant and not shocked. And he said, the spy has the knowledge to steal those secrets that will do the worst damage and sell them to the highest bidder to get the biggest return. That is what cyber criminals are doing, and that is what spies are doing. Hanssen's drops to the Russians look like this. He would hide them under a bridge, but today's spies don't have to do that. They don't have to wrap their secrets in packages and hide them in obscure drop sites. They still do it, but now they can send them directly to their intelligence officers in other countries online. And of course, they all get paid. So let's talk a little bit about cyber espionage and why these spies are in the worst possible place and why the cyber criminals are in the worst possible place, which, by the way, is wherever your data is held. Because, ladies and gentlemen, data is the currency of our lives. We've created a system where data is almost more important than anything else out there. For a business, of course, your family is the most important thing. Your health is, of course, most important, and your employees. But for a business, to run a business, we need that data. And so data has become a critical part of our lives. And of course, data is what spies and criminals want to steal. Everything from personally identifiable information to holding your data for ransom. And that is why ransomware is so effective. So let's talk about ransomware. Let's look at a couple examples to get this rolling forward. The ransomware threat. Well, there's quite a number of threats that we have to worry about with ransomware. Here's a good one. You might remember that in 2014, in November of 2014, Sony employees showed up at their offices in Culver City, California, and saw this screen. Not a fun screen to see. None of the employees could get into their computers. This was ransomware had existed before then, but it was still kind of little known. It wasn't as huge, and no one could get to any of that data that is the currency of our lives. And this is what they saw. Hacked by the GOP. That is not the Grand Old Party. That means the Guardians of Peace, which is sort of a joke, I guess, because if you're the Guardians of Peace, why do you have a big red skeleton with a Grim Reaper and flying skulls that look like spiders on the side? But that's beside the point. None of these employees could get into their data. It turns out this was North Korea who launched the attack, and it's believed that it was because Sony Pictures was going to release a movie called The Interview. And when you are a dictator of a country and have, by some reports, 2,000 to 3,000 employees who are cyber attackers working for you, you can do something like shut down a company that's going to release an embarrassing movie. The attackers spent at least 2 months copying files. Nobody could get into their data. They released all the files on something called a pastebin, which was basically a public place where anyone could go through them, including a lot of embarrassing emails, movies that would never be released because there they were, screenplays that would never be made into movies because people had already read them, and it caused untold damage. They also left this malware behind called the Shamoon Wiper malware, which is like a digital bomb. And what that would do is at some point wipe all of Sony's infrastructure, totally take down all of their data. And if they didn't have a good secure backup, that would be the end of it. They caught the malware before they could do that. They were able to save themselves, but the damage was enormous. Of course, we fast forward a little bit to WannaCry, which hit in 2017. Now, the WannaCry attack was another pretty interesting one. In fact, I think this is one of the worst cyber attacks in our recent history, and of course, the worst example of the most damaging ransomware attack. So to give a little bit more data about ransomware for those of you who aren't totally in the know, ransomware there are many different kinds of ransomware, but the most common kind is an attack where malicious software infiltrates your computer for a number of different ways and then encrypts all the data on your computer. So that's we call it a locky or a locking ransomware attack. That's the most common, and that's what WannaCry did. WannaCry was what we call a ransomware pandemic. When your computer was infected, it would reach out to other computers that were networked or connected and infect them too. And WannaCry, which was, of course, launched by the North Koreans, once again, affected 300,000 computers across 150 different countries. That's pretty serious. That's a lot of computers. And if we had a virus that spread that prolifically, we would call that what? A pandemic. So this was our first cyber pandemic. Now you'll see that they'll say the payment is going to be raised on so-and-so date, your files will be lost on so-and-so date. That puts you in a pressure situation. And you never want to be in that pressure situation during the attack. So what happened? Well, you could send $300 worth of Bitcoin to the address that they show down there below, but it would go nowhere. This attack was not meant to make money. This attack was just meant to destroy and disrupt computer systems. So WannaCry was a big problem. And one of the issues behind WannaCry, one of the most interesting issues, was that it affected an old version of Windows using a vulnerability that was stolen from the NSA. I know it gets complicated, but spies are complicated. This group called the Shadow Brokers stole an attack tool from the NSA, our national security agency here in the US, and used that attack tool to sell it online, made some money. Turns out North Korea got a hold of it, used it, and launched it. Who knows who their original target was, but it spread like a wildfire. Now, the NSA did tell Microsoft you should patch. Microsoft told everybody, hey, you might want to patch this. We think there's a pretty dangerous attack that's coming down the road. And at least 300,000 people didn't attack, and this would patch, and this would have been much worse had a security consultant not found a kill switch to the attack and stopped it. So what would you do? You find out that a cyber pandemic attacked and locked ransomware to over 300,000 computers. You think everyone in the world would patch, right? Wrong, because a few months later, even though everybody like me was on the news telling people, patch your systems, install that and patch that came out, there's a new attack on the way, an attack called NotPetya hit. Now, I might back up a little bit and say that in cybersecurity, we really don't have great marketing as far as naming attacks. WannaCry, not such a great name. NotPetya, looks like Petya, well, it's not, so we'll call it NotPetya. We need to get better with this marketing. Maybe people will take notice of these attacks more. But here we are with NotPetya. Same exact attack vector as WannaCry, the same malware, encrypts files. In this case, it was Russia attacking the Ukraine and it spread, but fortunately, it was about 150,000 computers before it was stopped. It was not the same damage as WannaCry, but it does teach a lesson. Patch your systems, because 99% of successful breaches attack unpatched systems or known vulnerabilities that we have a defense for. And that means that people are not practicing good cyber hygiene. But let's talk about some more ransomware attacks, because these things are crazy. This is a scary looking one, Annabelle. You know, I like to think of those who develop the ransomware, malware, the ransomware attacks as sort of like graffiti taggers. You know, they want to put their special name, their special signature on the attack vector. And one thing they like to do is use horror movies, because when you turn on your computer and you find that you can't see any of your data and you can't get at anything that's there, unless you had a secure backup that you can restore from, you're either paying or you're losing it. And that can be a scary situation. So here is Annabelle using a scary doll from a movie. Now imagine you see this right here when you turn on your computer and you can't get at any information. All you can do is pay. Annabelle was interesting. It was originally something that was developed as a test, but it's a nasty ransomware attack. It not only closes all your security programs when it loads, disables your firewall and turns off Windows Defender, it encrypts all your files and spreads through USB drives. So if you had a USB hooked in, it's going to try to find a way to infect someone else. And then it overwrites your boot record with a silly bootloader that gives a thumbs up to the creator. Once again here, you would have to pay Bitcoin to get your personal key to unlock or decrypt all your data. And until you buy that, you're not going to be able to get into your data. And here's a final one, my favorite one. This one's called Popcorn Time. Why is it my favorite one? It's because I'm sort of a cyber security geek and I like very clever attack vectors. I also studied psychology, and this uses a lot of psychology. to get involved in how they attack. So popcorn time's interesting. Same thing, your data is encrypted. And once again, you see at the top here, there is a timer. Let me get my pointer. So you'll see that there's a timer counting down. That's that pressure situation. If you don't pay, your files will be lost forever. So you worry, do I have time to get cybersecurity help? Do I have time to go find someone to talk to me about encryption and what I can do and how I can solve, or should I just pay? Well, they give you two options to pay, the fast and easy way and the nasty way. And they give you a choice. You can pay the Bitcoin to their wallet address and they'll send you the key and you can decrypt and have your data back. And by the way, when you do that, you can't be sure they're going to give you that key, and you also can't be sure they haven't left malware behind. Or the nasty way. Now the nasty way is interesting. Send this link to all of your friends, and if 2 of them pay, we'll decrypt you for free. So think to yourself, how many of you out there would think, who are the 2 people that are the most gullible and would pay? If you do that, you are now part of the ransomware business chain. You don't want to do that. That turns you into a hacker. And we want to solve the problem, not affect it. So how is this happening? Well, let's talk about social engineering. This is a pathetic attempt at social engineering. This is one that was used against me. I get probably 10 to 20 of these a day from all different places. These emails, and this email is one of the reasons that we get into so much trouble, is an attempt to get you to click on a link or open a file that is going to load the malware on your computer that will then install the ransomware and lock you until you pay. So if you're looking at what we call a spear phishing email, it's trying to social engineer you. You think it's from Apple, from the Apple ID, and you're worried because they're saying there's unusual activity. Someone tried to log on, change your password, or log in to unlock. So how do you know this is spear phishing? You have to be a little bit of a spy hunter. You have to review your email. You have to look at it carefully. Fortunately, a lot of criminals are lazy, and you've got some good clues. Poor grammar. We've reviewed illegal activity. Illegal is not even spelled right? The address that it's actually from, that has nothing to do with Apple. Log into unlocked. A real company is not going to send you a big block where you click to unlock. What happens? You end up logging in. Either you're loading the malware there or you're giving them users' names and password. Big errors, bad logos. All these things can tell you that this is a spear phishing attack. Let's look at another one. I like this one a lot, only because this is probably the best example of a spear phishing attack. This is the deadliest email that we've received in recent times, that anyone has received. This is the one that was sent to John Podesta in order to attack the DNC and the Hillary campaign in March of 2016. You'll note a few things. One, it's to his Gmail account. This is pulled off WikiLeaks, so that's why you see all of these little arrows here. I wanted to get the original email. This was actually a block that said change password. But you note that it's a shortened web address. If you see those shortened web addresses, that can mean that you're being spear phished, and from the Gmail security team. When John Podesta saw this, or his aides saw that, depending on who you believe, early on a Sunday morning, he was very concerned. And what he did is he sent it to his chief of staff, who looked at it. And she said, I'm not sure what to do with this email, who then sent it to one of the IT managers in the Hillary campaign, who looked at it and, like all of us today now, knew that this was most likely a spear phishing email, and that Mr. Podesta, the chairman of the Hillary campaign, should not click on that link. Here's the problem we have with email, and one of the reasons that we're so vulnerable to ransomware attacks. We love email. We love it. We love to talk through email, probably because all of us are a little bit introverted, but it's also convenient. It's efficient. We can think about what we're going to say, read and carefully digest what someone has asked us before we respond. We don't have to talk to a person. Some of you probably have phones in your office. Those are even going the way of the dodo. Most people are just using a cell phone. It's happening. or they're working from home. And when you get that call and you see unknown name, unknown number, there's no way you answer that. You're looking at the phone, you let it go to voicemail, you listen to the voicemail, you think about what you want to say, or even if you want to call the person back, and then you call them back. What you've done is you've converted that phone call to an email. So we're too involved in email. And the problem with email is you can't authenticate unless you're using encrypted email and certificates to know exactly whether that person is exactly who you're looking at. So here we are with email, and what does this manager do? Does he get in the car and drive over to his boss's house and say, don't click on that link? No. Does he get on the phone and call and ask? No. He sends an email. And what will you, and what does John Podesta do, or his assistant? Once again, not quite sure who it was. They clicked because the email said, this is a legitimate email. And we know exactly what it said because that security manager has been interviewed a million times. Podesta clicks on the link, 30,000 of his emails dating from 2008 to 16 are then sent to WikiLeaks by those who attacked, and it turns out it was the Russians. See, not the North Koreans this time. It was the Russians. It wasn't just him. A lot of folks at the DNC and across government were spearphished this way, and quite a deal of information was stolen. So why is ransomware so successful? I mean, why do we keep getting hit by ransomware? It's not just because we click on links in emails. It's for a number of ways. Now, first of all, ransomware works. Here's the global cost to business of ransomware. Starting in 2015, it was about 350 million. This is when ransomware was really taking off. Ransomware as a crime, ransomware to make money, not just attacks on Sony, which were for revenge. In 2016, it jumped to $1 billion. That's a huge amount of money. And $5 billion just last year. Now, there are some predictions, and Cybersecurity Ventures does a ransomware damage report every year, that by 2019, it's going to be an $11.5 billion crime. I'd kind of like to see where it is this year by the end of 2018 before we predict 2019. You know, 1 billion to 5, if we continue that delta, we'll probably be at that 11.5 billion by the end of this year and much more in 2019. So it has an enormous cost to global business. And it's something that we clearly have to worry about. Ransomware targets businesses most likely to pay. So think of some of the businesses that are most likely to pay if they are hit by a ransomware attack. Infrastructure. So ransomware does attack our critical infrastructure. Here in the United States and in other countries, power companies have been locked by ransomware. Of course, if you want to really hurt another country, one of the best attacks in warfare is cyber warfare. And one of the best strategies is to try to take out the power grid. So you can attack the critical infrastructure of a country by collecting enough members or systems within a power grid and locking it with ransomware to shut it down for the period of time it takes to restore from hopefully a secure backup, and there might not be one. The medical industry, obviously any industry where there is a time pressure to get systems back up is a serious target for attack. Financial industry, by the way, is part of our critical infrastructure. You log into your bank account, you don't know how much money you have because the bank can't tell you. You are going to freak out. We all would. So that is part of our critical infrastructure, and of course is a key target of attack, not just for criminals who want to steal or want to get paid a ransom, but also for cyber attackers and spies who want to attack our critical infrastructure. Obviously, any industry with heavy customer data and small businesses lacking cyber security. Once again, this is about supply and demand. Criminals are finding a way to make a quick dollar. And because it works, they're going to continue to do it. So ransomware is a supply chain business, and that's important to think about. Ransomware has every single part of that supply chain, and it's also aided by our technology. If you think about Bitcoin and Tor, Bitcoin being a digital currency, which allows ransomware attackers to get paid. And then Tor, which is stands for the Onion Network, which is an anonymous network where they can ask questions. These allow a proliferation of service providers, so anyone can get into the business of ransomware attack. From 2016 to 17, there has been an over 2,500 increase in the sale of ransomware on the dark web. Now, this is why ransomware is so prolific. It's kind of important. There are currently over 6,300 dark web marketplace listings that are selling ransomware. What does that mean? That's 45,000 product listings. That means that if you want to get into the business of ransomware, if you want to start sending out malware and getting people locked and getting paid in Bitcoin, then all you have to do is go on the dark web, that obscure anonymous part of the internet that criminals like to go to, and download a ransomware toolkit. And the prices for these kits aren't too much. They can be from 50 cents to 3,000, and with a median price of about $10. That $10 can get you in, and a little bit of know-how, a college degree can get you into the ransomware business. So here are some of the economy tiers. Ransomware has people who author it, who build the software, or we'll call it in tier 2, ransomware as a service. They distribute it. And those distributors are the people who are launching the attacks and trying to get people to click on links and open attachments and get infected by the malware that is then going to lead to the encrypted data. And then, of course, hopefully, if you're the attacker, you want to get payment. And then, the other thing that attackers do that's really important for you to know about is this command and control. Sometimes it's not just about getting paid. Sometimes it's about taking control of your computer, stealing secrets, and then using those secrets for something else. If it's a criminal, they might steal personally identifiable information and sell it. If it is a spy, they might use it later to recruit new spies or to attack. So you also want to understand that ransomware attackers, you're a repeat customer. If you pay, they know that they might get you to pay again. So just because you paid and you got your data decrypted doesn't mean that you don't still have malware on your system. You have to make sure that you've cleaned all the malware off your system, or they'll just come back and attack you again the next week. And one interesting thing that was found out in a recent report is that you can get paid a lot of money as a ransomware attacker. If you look over, and let me get my pen. If you look over here, you can see that a ransomware attacker can make over $100,000 a year starting salary. That is a booming business. If you are in a small country and you've just graduated with a computer degree, and the starting salary in, say, Romania, Ukraine, Lithuania, Brazil is under 50K, and you have an opportunity to make $100,000 tax-free just to trick people into clicking links and then paying you money in Bitcoin, people will do that. People without will try to find it wherever they can. And that means that they will use unscrupulous methods. And ransomware is one of the most successful methods of stealing. And here are some other costs to business. Damage and destruction. You have loss of data, downtime, right? You can't work. Your people can't get bills paid. You can't collect revenue. Lost productivity. When you're dealing with remediating ransomware attack, you're obviously not going to be working. And if you're locked and all of your data is encrypted and you can't use your computer systems, recently a law firm, in fact, my old law firm, told associates to go home because they couldn't work. There's disruption to your course of business. You have all the costs for forensic investigators to come in and say, how did it happen? Why did it happen? Who attacked you? How can we stop this in the future? You have to restore all your systems and your lost data and delete hostage data and systems that might still be affected by malware. It can be a huge reputational harm, especially if they don't just lock you with ransomware, but they steal information and do what they did to the Hillary campaign in 2016 or Sony in 2014 and put all that information you don't want public out in the public. And finally, you got to do employee training. You should be doing it anyway, but you have to do it in response to those attacks. So it can be pretty significant. And all of these steps, all of these problems are ones that you'll face if you get locked by ransomware. So look, I want to get into a little bit about what you can do, how you can protect yourself from ransomware. And then I'm going to hand it off to Acronis to talk about a pretty phenomenal solution that they have that can also help you manage these steps so you don't have to have the huge headache yourself. So let's talk about how you prepare for a ransomware attack. Well, first of all, what does the federal government say? I mean, first of all, the FBI has made a statement very recently saying, we do not encourage you to pay for ransomware attacks. Why? Why would the FBI say don't pay? Well, one of the reasons is because when you pay, it encourages more ransomware attacks. If people keep paying, that means that it's still a good business to get into ransomware. If you're going to successfully lock people and they're going to pay you, you're just going to continue working in that role as a ransomware attacker, because it's a known commodity. You have people that will pay. So the feds really don't want us to pay because it encourages more ransomware attacks. But because ransomware attacks are so expensive, and because these attacks are so prolific, I mean, we're looking at an estimated $11.5 billion worth of global ransomware crime in 2019, the Fed said something a little bit different recently. Basically, they're saying that, however, after your systems are compromised, you have a serious decision on your hands. You have to evaluate all of your options, which may include paying. If you don't have a good secure backup, if you don't have a plan in place ahead of time, if you don't have the technology or the feasibility or the know-how to save yourself or the budget to bring in cyber professionals to come and protect you, then you might have to pay. And so it behooves you to be prepared, because ransomware relies on poor preparation. If you haven't thought about ransomware before this webinar, then you are fortunate if you haven't been locked by ransomware. And now, after attending the webinar, of course, you're going to know that it is a threat. You're going to know that it is a prolific threat and that there's a good chance that any of us could be locked by it. And you're going to know some of the tools, including knowing how to analyze a spear phishing email that will protect you. But there's more you need to do. Here are some of the things you have to do. You really have to invest in technology. You can't stop all of the attacks yourself just by reviewing all your email. That is an example of a malware-based attack, a spear phishing email, where you click on a link or you open an attachment that then forces you to install the malware yourself on your computer. There are also fileless attacks, or those we call living off the land attacks, that never actually use a file. They use vulnerabilities in your software or your web pages, like what happened to Atlanta, or vulnerabilities in apps that you download that are known by the attackers and not known by the developer yet, that aren't patched. Or, like I said earlier, they're just trying to hit someone who is vulnerable because they don't routinely patch their systems. So you have to invest in technology that constantly is hunting the ransomware. And there are many examples out there. And as I said, Acronis, who hosted this webinar and brought me here to talk to you, is going to give you an example of a great one that they have. You have to patch your systems. God, I can't say this enough. Please patch your systems. When you get an alert from Apple or Google or Microsoft or any other saying that there's a patch, sometimes they say, we're just quashing some bugs. Yeah, sometimes those bugs are pretty severe vulnerabilities that they found and they want to protect you from. Patch your systems. Make sure that you don't have those vulnerabilities that are exploited by the ransomware attackers. Have a preparedness plan. We're talking about the cost on business. Now, I know that some of you are just consumers, like me. We're all consumers. We're all people with computers and information at home that we don't want someone to steal. But businesses are especially vulnerable because attackers know that they have the money to pay. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for the attack. Sit down with your close team, your lawyer, with your communications person, with your CFO and your CISO if you have one, or your cyber expert or your IT support. Sit down and tell them in the room, what do we do if we get locked by ransomware? Do we have a plan? And if your answer is a bunch of shrugged shoulders, come up with that plan. Do it now when you're not in that pressure situation where your system is locked and there's a countdown timer, because that's the worst place to be. Train your employees. train them to know what to do. If they see an email that looks fishy, right? Get that? Fishy, see what I did there? A spear phishing attack? I'm sorry, that was a bad one. But still, I went and spoke for a company and I talked to their CISO and she had this amazing idea. It was instead of holding people responsible for missing spear phishing attacks, every time someone identified a email that looked like it was a spear phishing attack or an email that might compromise systems, she gave them a sweetest fish, that positive reinforcement. But you have to train your employees. They have to at least know what they look like, know to look for that bad grammar and shortened linked and all that stuff in order to not click on those links or open those attachments that are going to be the major vector that ransomware attacks are launched from. And then finally, you have to have routine backup of your key systems. The thing about ransomware is, even the best technology can't stop everything. So if the only way to save yourself if you happen to be locked by ransomware is to be able to restore the data from backup. Now, we all back up, but if your last backup was 160 days, that means that that's 160 days of data that you are going to lose if you're hit by a ransomware attack that your technology can't stop, or if you don't have technology in place to stop it, it's not going to help you much. So you have to have a secure backup. You have to make sure your backup isn't vulnerable. That Annabelle ransomware attack that I talked to you about and many other attack vectors will actually reach out to strip, disable, or delete any backups that are networked currently to your computer that they can reach out and touch. So if you've just got a backup drive plugged into your laptop at home, and that is your backup solution, if that ransomware can reach out to that networked backup drive and erase it, you are left out of luck. Add your favorite bad word in there because you are not going to have a backup to restore from. You will have no solution to protect yourself from that ransomware. So you need a secure backup, one you know is encrypted, isn't vulnerable, and is going to be there when you need it, just in case you get hit by ransomware and your technology can't stop it. And just to reinforce that point, make sure your backup is secure. I can't say this enough because if it isn't, then that ransomware might reach out and delete it or compromise it. So with this, I'm going to hand it off to James for a little bit to talk about secure backup and how Acronis can help you. And then we're going to come back to me and I'm going to talk about what you can do to stop some of the future ransomware attacks that I see coming, stuff that I'm predicting down the road, new and ingenious attacks that I think you need to know about and that I really want you to consider as you invest in technology and training and backup in order to protect yourself. So James, you are the best person here to talk about what Acronis can do for our attendees. And so I'm gonna hand it over to you for 10 minutes or so and then back to me. And I'm gonna wrap this thing up before we take questions and answers.
Eric, thank you so much for that fascinating presentation. I think it's alternately terrifying to hear the extent of the ransomware threat. I know I was just reading Verizon's data breach investigations report that they came out with a few weeks ago, and it showed ransomware to clearly be the single largest malware threat the last 12 months, involving something like 40% of breaches involving malware. And as you have shown, the projections show this is just growing. I also like to note that your recommendations were fantastic about mitigation steps that you can take, but as I'm sure some of our audience knows that some of those can be difficult to make happen. So for example, we have many customers for whom patching and operating system updates are a challenge because they have extensive business critical applications that need to be rigorously tested to make sure that a patch or an OS update won't break them. In a perfect world, they would be able to move on from those legacy apps, but they're stuck with them, and this makes keeping up with the patching and OS upgrade treadmill, which is a job by itself anyway, very difficult to keep on top of. And no matter how much employee training you do, there's always an employee who is tired, unwary, opens up their email after a couple glasses of wine, isn't really on alert. You know, I've worked for companies where a breach was introduced by someone on senior leadership, and that wasn't someone I was going to go after and, you know, tisk at for him being careless with what is known as a whale phishing email. So the concept that Eric has introduced that I want to expand on a little bit here is this notion of secure backup. So as Eric noted, backup is your absolute fail-safe in the event of a modern malware attack like ransomware. You know, this is how you basically turn back the clock to that point in time where before someone was careless enough to click on a link or visit a website that they shouldn't have, or open an attachment that they shouldn't have. So if you're doing, you have a good rigorous backup regimen, that is your works every time kind of restoral mechanism, way to rid yourself of the ransomware that's locking up your systems, and avoid paying that ransom, which, you know, half the time you might pay and the key won't work, or you won't, the criminals won't actually deliver it on you. Another reason why it's a bad idea to pay the ransom is over half the time you can pay, half the people that pay don't get to unlock their data anyway. So that's your basic bottom line is backup. The problem with backup, and again, Eric alluded to this, is that not everyone has the luxury of doing backup in a way that their recovery point objective, the point in time that you have to go back to restore your systems, is relatively recent. Your typical backup plan, maybe your most critical applications you've backed up as recently as a day ago or a week ago. Less critical systems, you have to go back much further in time to successfully restore. And there are huge costs to your business in having to lose that data through restoral. It may, and often is the best option as a response to a ransomware attack. But again, it's expensive. You will lose customer data. You will lose business opportunities. You may suffer reputational loss. And certainly you will suffer disruption. A lot of costs associated with restoring from backup, better than succumbing to the ransomware threat and paying the crooks. But there are non-trivial costs associated with doing that. The other issue that we now face today is that ransomware crooks are smart. They figured out that where backup exists, that greatly reduces the likelihood that the victim will pay. And so there are many new ransomware variants that attack the backup agent and attack backup archives. Because an encrypted, a backup archive that's been encrypted by someone else that won't give you the key unless you pay for it doesn't do you any good in a restoral scenario. So at this point in 2018, and particularly as ransomware crooks get more sophisticated, clever about thwarting mitigation efforts, traditional backup is no longer enough. So we are advocating this concept of secure backup, which elevates traditional backup capabilities with defenses against new malware threats like ransomware. So the goal here is to get to a response to a ransomware attack where your recovery point objective and your time to recover approach zero. In other words, you want your backup data protection infrastructure or services to be able to respond to a ransomware attack by identifying it, stopping it immediately, and then quickly recovering any damage that it's done, restoring any files that it's encrypted before you were able to detect it, which is usually a handful of things, even in the best case scenario, to restore that nearly immediately. This also means that because ransomware now looks for backups to encrypt as well, to prevent you from restoring from backup, you need secure backup that has agents and backup archives that have been hardened against attacks, which basically make it impossible for malware to try to encrypt it. We also think there are some advanced features that will also be really helpful, particularly in things like compliance scenarios. Say you're subject to Europe's new general data privacy regulation, where you have to protect the personal data of EU residents. The ability to certify that files that you have restored after an attack or just from a traditional backup are in fact exactly identical to what you stored when you backed them up. Next slide, please. So again, traditional backup is really important, and from our perspective, we think it needs to be as complete as it can possibly be. So that means any deployment, whether you're backing up to premises, you're backing up to a private cloud, to a public cloud, to a vendor cloud like the Acronis Data Cloud that we offer to our customers as cloud backup and storage target, and big commercial cloud services like Amazon and Azure and so forth. Any workload, whether it's on your premises, whether it's a virtual machine environment, a variety of application workloads, and any platform from a server to a workstation to a laptop to mobile devices like tablets and smartphones. And basic traditional backup should give you a lot of flexibility as to how you recover. The file level, image level, between systems, like between virtual machines and physical machines, between virtual machines and clouds, etc. Next slide, please. That kind of comprehensive traditional backup should support every operating system, every physical platform, every virtual platform, every cloud platform, every workload in your environment from a single unified platform. There's a lot of obvious reasons why we think this is the right approach to traditional backup. But as we say, that's just the basics anymore. Classic backup is no longer enough. You need secure backup. Next slide, please. So the way Acronis is addressing this concept of secure backup is with a capability that we call active protection, which is built into all our backup products. So that includes the premise and cloud-based product that we sell to businesses, which is called Acronis Backup and Acronis Backup Advanced. Acronis Backup Cloud, which is a product that we sell to service providers, and they offer backup as a service on it, and also our consumer product, Acronis TrueImage. So it's built into all these products, it's included with them, it's not a cost extra feature. And what this does is extends the capability of the backup agent on every machine with a machine learning artificial intelligence engine, which, because it's sitting there looking at file system activities to keep track of what might need to be backed up incrementally or not, it's kind of in the catbird seat to look for suspicious activity associated with ransomware attacks. So like, that process is suddenly trying to rename a bunch of files and it's starting to encrypt them. Is this legitimate? Is it something that's known and approved that we've already identified as something that should be on our whitelist? Or is it suspicious? And if it is suspicious, active protection immediately terminates that process and then restores any files that have been encrypted before its AI, its machine learning based heuristics went, that looks suspicious. Usually a few files that get encrypted before it makes that decision, but it's got local cache that it can instantly restore those files from. So you go from a situation of having to restore from some old backup and all the associated lost data and costs associated with that to having this near instantaneous recovery from the ransomware attack. So zero recovery point objective, near zero recovery time. Because the backup agents have been hardened, as well as the backup archives have been hardened against attacks, that will also thwart these new varieties of ransomware that look for backups to seek and to encrypt to thwart those recovery efforts. We extend the kind of concept of secure backup to include what we are doing in both software-defined storage and storage of backup archives. So both on your own premises, in our cloud, or any of the clouds that we allow you to use for backup archiving and storage. We provide super strong encryption and very strong security certifications of that. So you've got some confidence that they cannot be undone by a brute force attack or other means. If you use our encryption, your backups and your stored files will be secure. We've also got some cool new capabilities taking advantage of blockchain. This is Acronis Notary and Acronis Assign, which basically allow you to store a hash of all files, whether it's stored files or backed up files, in a commercial blockchain. Ethereum is the one we use, but it's extensible to other ones. And so that when you restore from backup or recall a file from storage, you can check against the hash you can hash it and check that hash against the blockchain, and thus be able to attest that the file has not been tampered with in any way. We use a similar kind of capability with Assign to support electronic document citing. All of these capabilities are really helpful if you've got, for example, consumer customers who are residents of Europe. And if they reside in the EU, that means you as a business, regardless of where you're headquartered, are now subject to GDPR, and you've got to protect that customer's data. And these kind of capabilities are really kind of foundational building blocks for your compliance to GDPR, as well as existing industry-specific privacy regulations like HIPAA. Again, we've also gotten kind of key security certifications like ISO 27001 to also support those compliance efforts. Next slide, please. Now, I know I've been bragging on this stuff a lot, but it's not just Acronis that talks about the incredible capabilities of active protection in identifying, stopping, and restoring from ransomware attacks. So the graphic that you see up there is the results of an independent third-party test by NioGuard Security Labs, which compared a bunch of B2B data protection products on the market for their ability to detect and stop a wide range of ransomware strains that are out there. And Acronis is the second bar from the left, and you look at the ones that we successfully defeated, and it's not really close who's in second. So leading capability in the market for anti-ransomware capabilities. There's another 2 or 3 organizations that I'm citing here. We can provide you with those reports if you're interested. The anti-malwaretest.com review of backup products, which basically said we're the best at protecting ourselves, protecting our own backup agent and backup archives. Really important. You know, if ransomware attack gets through and your backups also encrypted, you're in a bad way. And our self-protection capabilities of secure backup are the best in the market for thwarting that. There's some additional reviews of just the pure anti-ransomware capabilities of active protection, which we also ran away with tests by avtest.org and the Anti-Malware Test Lab. So it's not just us patting ourselves on the back here. An array of independents have third-party testing organizations have attested to that as well. Next slide, please. So that does it for my bit. I encourage you to go to acronis.com/business/backup. You can get a 30-day trial of Acronis Backup with Active Protection and play with the capabilities yourself. Please reach out to me at that contact info for direct questions, and follow me on Twitter. Thanks again for your attention. Back to you, Eric.
Thanks, James. Thank you. Well, look, I want to leave you with just a little bit of what I see as the ransomware of the future. Part of being a spy hunter, part of being a counterintelligence operative, and about thinking about countering the intelligence, the attacks of other parties, is to think about what might come down the road. A little bit of this is what we're starting to see now, and how ransomware can actually get worse. So let's talk about a few of those things. I'll just come on the screen, we'll chat, and we'll wrap this up. And once again, for those of you who need to jump off, because I know it's 12, I will be on Twitter at EONEILL, and I'll show you all the addresses in just a moment, answering your questions for the next hour until 1 o'clock. So please do come on there, follow me, and ask a question, anything you want, as long as it's not too personal, although I do get a little. So let's talk about ransomware in the future. I think that we know that criminals are going to continue to invest in ransomware as long as it works. And until everybody has a great technological solution, training, and the ability to stop ransomware, it's going to continue because criminals are making a ton of money on ransomware attacks. So how is this going to spread in the future? Because one thing that criminals do is innovate to find new and effective ways to attack. You're going to be vulnerable over social media. Social media is going to be used more and more as a vector for attack. Think of all the different social media you use. It can be used from everything from a social engineering attack to get you to click on a link to vulnerabilities and links in social media that you click because you think it's something else. Spies are going to use ransomware as what we call in the business a false flag attack. You get locked by ransomware, you do all the work to get your data back, and you think, I've solved the problem. But ransomware was just a trick. Ransomware wasn't the focus of the attack. The real focus of the attack was to steal your data and not let you know it's been stolen. This can be used for everything from corporate intelligence to collecting information that can then be sold later on the dark web to make a secondary source of income off the same attack. Spies will increasingly use ransomware to disrupt and to destroy. I'm very worried about critical infrastructure attacks. I constantly say that we don't have to worry about countries like North Korea because of any kind of nuclear threat. It's the cyber threat we need to worry about. And ransomware is a very good, efficient way to launch attacks against our critical infrastructure. And then, of course, we need to worry about the Internet of Things. Think about how many things in your home are connected to the Internet. They are all vectors for attack. And as we go into the future, we're going to open ourselves up for more ingenious and clever and diabolical ransomware attacks. Imagine this scenario. You get in your smart car and you punch your thumbprint right up against your infotainment system and to start the car, and it doesn't start. And instead you get a screen that says, you have been locked by ransomware, pay X amount of Bitcoin, and we will start your car. I mean, sounds crazy, but this is where we're going into the future. Or your smart home locks you in, or your stereo won't stop playing, or your videos are stolen from your home security system or your internet camera, and you get an email that says, pay this amount, or these videos are going public. These are the sort of things we need to worry about. This is an attack that doesn't have an end that we can see. So it behooves yourself to protect against ransomware. If you don't protect, then you might be vulnerable and you might get locked. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Twitter, and I'm going to ask everybody to come over there to this address, at @eO'Neill, that's my Twitter account, and @Acronis, and please use the hashtag #AcronisWebinar, and I'll answer your questions on Twitter. The nice thing about Twitter, even though it is social media, and social media does leave it open, it means the questions will be brief and the answers will be succinct. So please come over to Twitter, give me a follow, give Acronis a follow, and make sure you use that hashtag when you ask your question so I can find you. And I'll do my best to give you answers that give you everything you need to know and answer as best as possible. So thank you for attending the webinar, those of you who hung on a little past noon, and I'll see you online. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks again, everybody. We will be sharing a webinar link to the recording of this so that we encourage you to share that with your friends and colleagues. Thanks again for attending.